Hello everyone, thank you for joining me. I'm Kerri. Today I'll show you how to make this easy sheep. I'll show you how to make the lambs in a separate video. I'll be using these colours today because you'd find it quite difficult to see me using black. I'll be using 8-ply wool today, which is light worsted in the US and double knit in the UK. I've got cream and copper. I've got a 2.5mm crochet hook, a darning needle to weave in my ends, scissors. I've got thread and a sewing needle to stitch it together, and I've got black and white cotton to embroider on eyes and the nose and mouth. For this sheep I used silver sequins and black beads, and what I'd really prefer is white buttons, but as my craft shops closed down I find it really difficult to get a lot of supplies at the moment. But if you have tiny white buttons, you could use those. I'm going to start on the body, so I've got my cream and I start with a magic loop. For a magic loop, I put my hook on my wool and I bring the short end over the top and then bring the long end over the short end, put my hook into my circle, pick up a loop and bring it through. And that's the magic loop. And now I work 3 chain. And I'm going to work 18 double crochet into my circle. A double crochet is called a treble in the UK. For the double crochet, you put your yarn around the hook, put your hook into the circle and pick up a loop and bring it through the circle. Put your yarn around the hook and bring your hook and yarn through 2 of the loops on the hook, and then put your yarn around your hook and then bring your hook with your yarn through the next 2 loops, and that's a double crochet. So yarn around your hook, put your hook in through the circle and pick up a loop and bring it back through the circle, yarn around, bring your hook with your yarn through the 2 loops, yarn around, your hook with the yarn through the last 2 loops. We need 18 double crochet into our circle. Now I've got my 18 double crochet. I take hold of the tail and I pull it tight and it draws my circle in. Now I'm going to do a slip stitch into the 3rd chain. The 3rd chain is just the chain there at the top. So I put my hook in, put my yarn around and bring the loop through the chain and then through the next stitch. And that's our first row finished. For row 2, we start with 3 chain and then we're going to work 2 double crochet into each stitch. So we put our yarn around our hook, we put our hook into the first stitch and bring up a loop, put our yarn around and through the 2 loops, yarn around through the next 2 loops. And then we're going to work another double crochet into the same stitch. Now we're going to continue right around our circle, working 2 double crochet into each stitch. Now I've worked my 2 double crochet into each stitch right around. Now I'm going to slip stitch into my first double crochet into the top. So this first stitch here, I put my hook in, pick up a loop, bring it through and then bring it through the other stitch. For row 3 we start with 3 chain and now we're going to work a double crochet cluster over the same stitch as the chain and the next 2 stitches. For a double crochet cluster we put our yarn around our hook, we put our hook in to the same stitch as the chain, bring up a loop, yarn around and take it through the first 2 loops, and we've got 2 loops left on our hook. Then we put our yarn around our hook, put our hook into the next stitch and bring up a loop, yarn around and take it through the first 2 loops, and we've got 3 loops left on our hook, and then yarn around, hook into the following stitch, bring up a loop, yarn around through 2 loops, and we've got 4 loops left on our hook, and then we go yarn around and take it through all the loops, and that's a double crochet cluster. Now we're going to work 3 chain, slip stitch into the same stitch as the last part of our double crochet cluster, and then slip stitch into the next stitch, and we're going to repeat the cluster again. So we start with 3 chain, and we put our yarn around our hook, hook into the same stitch as a chain and bring up a loop, yarn around and take it through 2 loops, yarn around, hook into the next stitch and bring up a loop, yarn around through 2 loops, put our yarn around and hook into the next stitch and bring up a loop, yarn around through 2, and then yarn around and through the 4 loops, and then we work 3 chain and slip stitch into the same stitch as the last part of our cluster, and then slip stitch into the next stitch, and we're going to repeat that all the way around. So 3 chain, a double crochet cluster over the same place as a chain and the next 2 stitches, then 3 chain and slip stitch into that same stitch as the last part of the cluster and slip stitch into the next stitch, and then 3 chain and then another double crochet cluster over the same stitch as the chain and the next 2 stitches, and then we just work around the row like that. And when we get to the end of the row, we just slip stitch into the bottom of our first cluster and fasten off. And that's the body done. That will just flatten out. Now for the head, I've got my coppery colour and I make a magic loop. So I pull the tail across my hook and bring my long piece over the top and bring up a loop through my circle, and there's my magic loop. And I start with 3 chain and I work 14 double crochet into my circle. Once we've got our 14 double crochet in our circle, we take hold of the tail and pull it tight. For the head, I pull it as tight as I can, and we slip stitch into the top of the 3 chain. So just up in there, we put our hook in and bring a loop through the chain and through the stitch on our hook. And then we work 1 chain and we work 2 single crochet into each stitch. So for a single crochet we put our hook in, bring up a loop, yarn around and take it through the 2 loops on our hook, and we work another single crochet into that same place. So hook into the same stitch, bring up a loop, yarn around and through the 2 loops, and we work 2 single crochet into each stitch. A single crochet is called a double crochet in the UK. When we get to the end of the row, we slip stitch into our chain from the beginning of the row. So we put our hook into the chain, yarn around and bring the loop through the chain and through the stitch, the loop on our hook. And that's row 2 finished. We're going to start on the ears now, so we work 4 chain. We miss the first chain and we work 1 single crochet into each of the remaining chain. And then slip stitch into the same stitch on the head, and now we slip stitch into each of the next 8 stitches. Now we work the second ear. It's worked the same. We start with 4 chain. We miss the first chain and work 1 single crochet into each remaining chain. And then slip stitch into that same stitch on the head and fasten off. And that's the head done. For the ears, when I stitch it on, I'll just stitch them down a bit. Now for the legs, we start with 7 chain. We miss the first chain and work 1 single crochet into each of our remaining chain. And fasten off. And that's the first leg. We work another one the same. So 7 chain, we miss the first chain and work 1 single crochet into each remaining chain. And fasten off. Now that's all our pieces crocheted. I'll just weave in my ends and I'll be back and we'll put it together. Now there's all my pieces with the ends finished off. The first thing I do is embroider on the face on the head. So I'll do that and I'll be back. Now I've put a face onto the head. Now I attach the head to the body, just in the middle there, and as I stitch it on, I'll stitch the ears down as evenly as I can. So I'll do that and I'll be back. Now the last thing we do is attach the legs to the body, so just evenly under there. So I'll attach them and I'll be back and show you the finished sheep. And there's the finished sheep. I'll make a lamb to go with the sheep in another video. If you like my video, please like, subscribe and share. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest and Twitter. The details are in the description below, along with the details of my website. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.